Well, how you doing today? This is your host, Scott Wisenbaker, and this is The Solution. Today is the second to the last lesson in this series, and it's been quite a journey. We've gone through quite a bit. So today we're going to call this reintegration. Reintegration is when we're going to go back into the community and we're going to claim a life that maybe we never had before. Now, some of you may have always had everything working well for you on the outside, but my guess is that the majority of you are going to be much more like me, where we go out of jail with the best of intentions, but everything falls apart. It falls apart every time, which is why we always seem to come back to the same behaviors that eventually lead us back to the same place. And after a while, not only do we become comfortable in jail, but we begin to expect it because we feel like it is just a part of our life. And it's unfortunate that that's where we end up, but you would be surprised at how many people feel that way. Those of us who have been in and out of jail. Now, there's a lot of people with an addiction who never go to jail, and they don't quite have the same understanding that a lot of us do about, what jail is, what it's like, and how you can end up spending far more time in there than you ever thought possible just because you wanted to get high and have a good time. A lot of people are under the illusion that as long as they don't shoot or rob somebody, that they're never going to go to jail. But they're cluelessly driving around, intoxicated. They're walking around with dope in their pocket. For some reason, they've evaded capture or detection up until that point of the day that it happens. But the one thing that we know is that if we use long enough, eventually we're probably going to end up in jail. And, as so many of us do. But back to our lesson, and I know I tell you I'm excited all the time, and I really am excited because you are just right at the end of this program, and there is so much information that you have as you move forward. And we want to talk about what happens when we leave, because those doors are going to swing open, and you're going to go outside, and guess what? The world hasn't changed at all. It's the same people are doing the same stuff. And it's really easy to fall back into that same habit, especially if our family or the people that we live with are the people who are doing that stuff. It's almost impossible to not fall back into some of those old dope behaviors. And we know now that if we do that, we're going to come back here. We also know now that if we utilize the information that we're putting forward to you in this program, that you don't ever have to come back to jail again. And that's my promise to you, that if you really do this, you never ever have to go back to jail. How do I know that? Because after 42 arrests, the last time I went to jail was in 1995. I have not been back since the day I got sober. It's that simple. We stopped with the dope behavior, we stopped going to jail. There's no mistaking in the fact that I put all of these leadership laws of success at the back of this program. Because we first had to go through the journey of the 12 steps to where we find out that we're going to live in 10, 11, and 12 for the rest of our life. That's going to require us going to a meeting once a week that is our home meeting, and then we're going to carve out a couple of hours for the people that we're going to sponsor and the places that we're going to go carry the message, which is why we spent so much time learning how to do a foundation meeting, knowing how to speak to people, and of course we find out that we have all this information inside of us. And because we went through this 12-step program and things started to change automatically, because the day that we sat down to decide that we were no longer going to behave the way we were behaving, and we were never going to treat people in a certain way, we didn't have to do that because that happens automatically. Remember, if it was up to me to decide that I was now going to become, a different person, I would have never been able to do that on my own. I tried to do that 41 times. And it wasn't until I finally got out and I got in touch with some people who knew what to do, who could get me through the work, so that I never ever had to go back. But along my journey, which differs from some of my friends who have never been to jail, or maybe, they're like, oh yeah, I've been to jail plenty because they got arrested 2 or 3 times. And then they're like, yeah, I had to sit in the county for a while. And you're like, really? How long were you there? And they're like, well, it's like there 3 days. I'm like, 3 days? So you're barely out of booking. I mean, that's nothing. And it's unfortunate that we know that that's nothing, because the vast majority of the population will never have to deal with going to jail for 3 days. But to us, we're like, well, I can just almost hold my breath for 3 days. That's not jail. Jail is months and months and months at a time, over and over, to where now you're starting to count years, not days. That's what happens if we do this enough times. Now, I'm hopeful that people who are watching this, that this is their first time to go to jail and stay for any period of time, and they now have the information that they can move forward and they don't ever have to come back, because we automatically learned how to start changing and realizing. The greatest realization is that the only thing that I can truly control is how I react. I can't control anything else. I can control how I react and how I treat other people. And if somebody just said, hey, treat people better, people have told me that. And it didn't work until we went through each one of these steps. Had a very significant point that we had to get through. We had to learn something about ourselves before we moved on to the next step. There's a point to each and every step. And then the maintenance steps, 10, 11, and 12 is where we're going to stay. And I think I keep saying that over and over, because I will tell you this right now. If you fail to do that, if you fail to live in 10, 11, and 12, and you fail to get connected to people, you will come back to jail. That is a promise I don't want to have to make. And maybe you'll be lucky and you'll evade arrest for some time. But my point is that if you don't do these simple things, our willpower doesn't keep us from doing dope or drinking. Our willpower is what helps us create habits. And once you walk out, everything's going to change. There is no longer any structure. There is no longer any schedule. It's all going to be up to you. And the proper use of your willpower is that I'm going to engage with other people. I'm going to follow up on the stuff I learned. I'm going to get right to work, and I'm going to start living within my own means. And we spent a lot of time talking about the budget of our time, that the average person has 57 hours of free time, allowing us to travel to and from work and work 40 hours, and allowing us all the time that we need to sleep, 8 hours a night, taking out about 5 hours for our recovery time. That allows us a ton of free time that we need to balance, and we need to do things that are going to make our life much more stable. Because to this point, our life has been chaotic. And when it's up and down and we go to these extreme highs and lows, that's when we find ourselves desperate. And we reach for that one coping mechanism that works better than anything we've ever known before. Because we know that if we get drunk or we get high enough, that we just don't care. And that's the powerful thing we have to overcome. And we learned along the way that the most powerful tool we have now is the fact that we can save another human life. Because from going through this work, we come into contact with people who are just ready to end their life. They can't live with the dope, they can't live without it, or the alcohol, or whatever it is. And they get to the point where they're just ready to check out. And I mean, they're ready to take their own life. Very often they will reach out and say, you have 5 minutes to tell me why I shouldn't kill myself right now. And that's when we run to that conversation. While most people are freaked out by that conversation, we are now almost looking forward to that. We don't want somebody to be in that much pain. But when they are in that much pain, they're so easy to work with. And we run to that conversation and we look at them and go, I remember the first time I felt that way. I wanted to die for years. And my prayer was this: God, if you're real, please just kill me tonight, because I can't take this anymore. I don't want to be here. And when we speak that to somebody and they look at us, they suddenly have a connection. They understand that we understand. And they're like, right, you get it. How come you're happy about being alive? And that's when we say, I stopped doing the dope, and I'm actually really happy about it, and I'm looking forward to tomorrow. If you want, I can show you how to do it. So that spark of hope just saved a human life. What's more powerful than heroin, cocaine, meth, or alcohol? Saving another human life. There's nothing more powerful. There's nothing more meaningful that we will ever do with our life. And we get to do it over and over. We are now uniquely qualified to help somebody in their greatest hour of need. And most people aren't, but we are. We learn the basics of finding a job and how to speak to somebody when they look at our criminal record and go, why would I ever give you a job? We learn that there's a lot of things that we need to take care of as we're moving up to that, and how we're dressed, how we're looking at them, how we're speaking. But you remember the golden answer here is that we look them in the eye at that moment and go, it's obvious that I have an addiction. You can see that from my criminal record. But what you don't know is that I attended this recovery program, and now I'm living in recovery, and there's a couple of things I have to do if I want to stay clean and sober for the rest of my life. But one of them is that I have to have a job so that I can stand on my own 2 feet and pay my own way in this world. I have to learn how to live in my budget. So what I'm saying is that I need a job. And if you give me a job, I will be here every day. Now, you would be surprised at how many times that will get somebody hired on the spot, or at least a call back within just a day or two, especially at a time when employment is shorthanded. We seem to have more jobs than we have capable people to do them. There's always going to be jobs that we're not allowed to have if we have a felony, when a special or certain license is required. However, sometimes we can apply for a waiver, especially if the job we're applying for and our unique history can put us in a place to be very useful or very helpful. So there are some walls we're going to run into, but we also need to ask. We need to try. Because if we don't try, we'll never truly know. I mean, there are some things that are just out. You have felonies, you can't be a cop. It doesn't matter who you ask. I mean, you can still ask. There is so many things that we can do. I am living proof. 42 arrests, 13 years on probation, which should have only been 1 arrest and 6 years on probation, possibly an early release if I had just done the right thing. But yet I managed to go to jail so many times they kept extending it to the point that I spent 2.5 years in the Dallas County Jail. Do you think that employers like that? Do you think that landlords like that? You know, speaking of landlords, sometimes I've never been able to live in a really nice apartment complex because my criminal record has kept me out. And so we can get depressed about that and go, well, the only place that I can live is dope infested, and it's horrific. But that's not necessarily true. Sometimes we might have to live, and there is dope around us, but let's be real honest. You could live in the nicest, classiest, richest neighborhood in America, and there's going to be dope around you. There are no neighborhoods that are free of dope. There is a lot more in some, and sometimes it's very much in the open, especially if it's where we're familiar and we have a bunch of friends, and they just come out and say, hey man, let's go. You've been locked up for a while. Let's go party. If we can avoid that, we want to. But one of the things that you can do is you look for individuals who are leasing out a small house or a duplex, maybe a room, and you get to talk to this owner, and you can tell them the same thing you would tell the future employer. It's like, yes, I do have an addiction, but this is what I've done different. I'm in this recovery program. I go to meetings on these nights, and guess what? One of the things I have to do to stay clean and sober for the rest of my life is to stand on my own 2 feet and pay my own way, which means that I have a job, and I go to my job every single day so that I can pay you It's the same connection that you'll make with that future employer as that future landlord. And some of them aren't going to hear it on both sides. But some of them will go, you know what? I really want to give that person a chance. And they'll be impressed with your honesty. Sometimes they're not. They're going to go, nope, not here. You need to go down the road. And we don't want to get mad. We don't want to argue with them. We just want to go down the road. Because that person may be thinking it over later, or maybe they're speaking to their spouse going, you won't believe who tried to rent the place today, and they start talking about it. And as they're talking about it, they're like, I really did believe the person, and their spouse may go, so why aren't we trying to give them the opportunity? I mean, let's give them the opportunity. So it may turn into yes, but if we run our mouth, and we say, well, screw you, dude, then it's obviously never going to happen. And you never know. He may know the other people in town that are renting houses, and he may say, hey, look, if this person comes by named so-and-so, yeah, you don't want nothing to do with that. We don't want to put ourselves in that situation. Remember that the only thing that we can truly control is how we react towards other people, which is how we treat other people. So we're going to try to do the right thing. We're going to try to get along with everybody. Those are the driving factors. We've studied the first 12 of the 15 laws of success. Tomorrow we're going to look at laws 13, 14, and 15. And we're going to tie it all together. And you're going to have the final pieces of information. Now, these, I don't want to say any one law is any more important than the other one. I keep saying, well, this is a very important law. They're all important. And they all tie directly into the 12 steps. Something that we would not have understood before we worked through those steps. This is why we had to, it's kind of a journey of realizations that we had to kind of come along. It's just like when you're talking to somebody about when they want to kill themselves, or they're just like, yeah, I don't understand why my life's not working, and we can start talking to them. We don't start off right at the end. We start talking to them so we can make that connection. And then we can tell them, hey, I can show you how to stay clean. I can show you how to do it. And actually be happy about it. Because we've all met that sober person who's absolutely miserable because they're just holding on to it and they're just pissed off all the time because they have no more, they have no way to cope with anything, no more coping mechanisms. They took away the one thing that worked and they never actually worked a program, so they're a time bomb. Sometimes they'll hold on to it for a while, but ultimately they're gonna erupt and it's gonna go crazy and they're gonna start doing the same thing that they were doing before. But in the meantime, while they're claiming to be clean and sober, but they're absolutely miserable and they're still treating everybody like crap, that doesn't say a lot for recovery. That's really not recovery. That's just being dry. But you have people who will go to meetings that are in that place, and they're just telling everybody that, well, recovery, it ain't all it's cracked up to be, but I'm not high, so I guess that's the good thing about it today. But this is wrong and this is wrong, and they just whine and complain, and everybody's like, wow, this is horrific. If that's what clean and sober looks like with the amount of time that he has, man, I don't want nothing to do with it. Do you remember earlier I told you about the guy I met who had 8 years, who was one of the most miserable people I ever met? And I almost walked away from it 100%. The only reason I went to another meeting after that at all, and I started going to different meetings, is because I thought somebody out there has to make some sense, and I desperately didn't want to go back to jail. So I had that little window of time where I was searching out somebody who might be able to help me, but I went to one meeting after another, and I concentrated on these big discussion meetings where people were complaining. Now, not all discussion meetings are bad. I just happen to find a lot of really bad ones. But the problem with the discussion meeting in the first place is that we let anybody say anything they want. And if somebody wants to complain for 5 minutes, they typically don't stop them. Now, I've been to a couple where they're like, okay, so this is what we're going to talk about today. This is our topic. And if you get off topic or you just start whining, we're going to ding the bell. I have been to some of those like that. I prefer the literature-based meetings where we're studying the book, we're talking about it, we're talking about the different ways that we can go and be helpful. People are asking questions, well, what does this mean, and how can I make this apply? That learning experience is what I crave. So if you can find something like that, then I think that that would be your best bet. But even if you're in a town where there's only one meeting, and it's one of these meetings where the same 3 or 4 guys complain about the same 3 or 4 topics every day, but that's all you have, you need to go and you need to find the person who looks like they're actually happy. And you start talking to them, and you find out they actually have it together. They're not using, they're not miserable, and they may only be going to that meeting because it's the only one in town as well. In most towns, I think you're going to have a wide choice of what meetings you want to go to, but it depends on how big the area you live in is. If you're in a very rural area, you may only have one choice. But I need you to remember that when this first started, they mailed the books to people because there wasn't meetings anywhere. And the people would get this book and read it, and it even gave them the instructions on how they were going to start a meeting, because they're going to go out and they're going to find people that they can work with. They're going to find people in the hospitals and in the jails. They may check with the churches and say, hey, you got somebody who's noodles a little loose because they're drinking or using too much, and we start finding these people that we can work with. We work with those people. They start getting well. They're eternally grateful. They want to know what they can do, so we start looking for more people, and then we meet, at least once a week, where we all come together and we study our literature, and then we talk about where else we can go and find more people to bring in, and a group can grow out of you carrying the message and going and finding somebody who is just arrested or in the hospital or any one of these places. It's also why we need to develop a relationship with law enforcement. As strenuous as that may be, as hard as it sounds, it's going to be a little easier than you think it's going to be. Because I was stunned. As I told you, some of my very best friends are in law enforcement now. And that freaks me out, because I used to hate them, because I just thought they were there to disrupt my life and put me in jail and try to make me do things I didn't want to do. And what I really found out is that the vast majority of them, we may not see eye to eye on everything, but I will tell you this: they want us to stop using, sometimes more than we want to stop using, because they know that they're going to arrest us over and over and over, and then they're going to find our body, and then they're going to go tell whoever loves us the most that we ain't ever coming back home. Which also explains why they get so angry with us sometimes when they arrest us over and over. And they're like, you're just not getting this. And they start telling us, I'm going to lock you up forever. Because they're trying to get us to see that our way is not working and we're going to end up dead. But they also have a job to do. And if we, being in a community, puts other people at risk and danger, possibly their own kids, then guess what? They do need to get us off the street. We go to jail because we deserved it. We earned it. We earned our trip to jail. We earned the fact that if they pull us over and they say, I need you to step out of the car and put your hands on the hood while they search our stuff because we've been arrested so many times, we earned that too. You remember, it happened to me once in Dallas, and I was all pissed off, and I was like, you got me standing out here looking like a effing criminal. And he just looked at me and goes, well, you are a criminal. And he was right. He was absolutely right. I earned everything that happened. If it was truly a fair world, the majority of us would be probably doing life because of the amount of times that we committed a felony, which is, in our case, having dope. I mean, if you've had dope on you more than 3 or 4 times, And guess what? If you got caught those 3 or 4 times with a felony amount of dope on you, at some point they're going to get tired of it and they're going to lock you up, and they're going to lock you up for good. Now, the great news is that the entire country is trying to look at this differently. We're trying to figure out how we can take up to 80% of the people that are in the county jail at any given time, teach them the information that we've been going over, and if they just take advantage of it, they never ever have to go back to jail again. We need to stand in front of the judge, and we're going to be held accountable for what it is that we've done. But once we get through the mess that we're in right now, we don't ever have to go back, and they're starting to see that. They're starting to allow people to do treatment over doing a little more time or figuring out a way to incorporate it in there. You of course have some people that say, well, you can't make me go to treatment, I ain't going to do it, there's nothing you can do to stop me. And they're going to say, you know what, you're right, so all we can do with you is put you in prison. But they're starting to look at how we can help the ones that don't want to come back, the ones that want to get out and have some sort of life. If I've done my job at all, then I've pounded home the fact that you wanting to be out of jail for the rest of your life, but wanting to still drink and use, them two things don't mix. We are not the average person out there. We are not the 89% of people in America who can drink at will and not have to worry about everything falling apart. We go wheels off every time. We're that 10 to 12% of the people with an addiction. And that's never going to change. And as long as we wrestle with that idea, then we're never going to be able to be free of all of this. Why is it that some of my friends that have done as much dope as I have done, and sometimes many cases for much longer than I did, why is it that some of them never went to jail? Because they stayed home. I went outside. And you know what? Once you catch the attention of the legal community, it's awfully hard to shake it. It's like once CPS has done an investigation on you, it's hard to shake that too, because if anything questionable ever happens, they're going to go right back to, well, we have a long history with this person, and they're going to be very quick to act if they have that history. When that officer drives down the street, if you look shady and he knows who you are, guess what? Y'all are going to have a conversation. That's just how it is. And if we understand that, then we can make sure that we don't ever have to go back to jail. Because if you're walking down the road and that officer sees you and thinks, oh, he's being shady, maybe he just thinks you're being shady because you always have been. He whips around, pulls up, comes out, talks to you. What's the one thing you can control? How you react. So if we're just honest and we're being tolerant and pleasant, we have an opportunity at that moment to advance our ability to help other people. Because that officer is used to you being full of shit. And you're going to be able to walk up to them. And remember, we talked about this too. They're looking at everything you're doing. They're watching you. Sometimes I feel like they can read your pulse just by looking at you, like they can see the pulses on your neck. I know they can't. That's ridiculous. But sometimes it feels that way because they are trained to look at how you're reacting. They're trained to see if you're being fidgety or not. They're just trained to observe everything that's happening. So what you're saying is only 25% of actually what you're doing. It's how you're communicating, but we usually, in the past, our communication skills weren't reliable because they weren't honest. But we have the opportunity now, because the first thing that they're going to realize when they start talking to us is, we're not high. And they can look in the computer and see that, oh, well, you've been out of jail for a month or two and you're not high. That's something they've never seen before. You also get the opportunity to tell them, hey, I know that we have a history, but guess what? I've been clean and sober for this long, because they may ask you, you got anything on you? You've been using anything? You're like, absolutely not. I've been clean for however long it's been, and I went through this program, and guess what? I got out, and I've got a job, and I got a cool place to stay. It's not maybe exactly what I wanted, but it's where I can get started. It's safe enough, and I'm putting my life back together. But the thing I wanted to tell you is, as many times as you've seen me and you've arrested me and you knew how full of crap I was, you can see now that I'm clean. So if you have somebody who needs help to get clean, I can show them what to do. Now, that first conversation, they may be like, yeah, right. They may not believe you, but they're going to remember that conversation. And they may even look up and see, they may look into you a little bit while they're, hey, let's see how he's doing. Oh, yeah, he hasn't been back to jail. They may follow up with you, but you have this awesome opportunity to start talking to law enforcement in a different light. And so that when that officer sees another officer and say, hey, guess who I saw? And they're like, I saw so-and-so. Oh, man, I saw him last week. He was actually clean. Told me that he wanted to help other people. The other officer's like, well, that's what he just told me. All of a sudden, you got 3 or 4 officers talking who all have the same story. And they're like, you know what? Let's give him a call, see if he can't come down and talk to old Fred in the back here, because he's probably sobered up since last night a little bit. Let's see if you can talk to him. You never know what's going to happen. But the one thing that we want to do is have that level of cooperation. We're not talking about snitching on anybody. I've never snitched on anybody in my entire life. That is not what we're talking about. We're talking about becoming a resource which can make you become the greatest tool that you have for the police and the sheriff's department to fight addiction in that community. Now, you may be sitting there going, what does any of this have to do with reintegration? Because you were going to tell us about reintegration. Well, guess what? This is the most important thing, and it has everything to do with reintegration. Because if we don't stay connected and we don't start looking for people to help and we don't start behaving differently and taking these principles and putting them into all of our affairs and trying to clean up all the wreckage that we've done out there, we're always going to come back. We're going to do it over and over and over until we're dead. And look, I don't need to tell you that this is deadly. It kills every single one of us if we don't treat it. The good news is it's so easy to treat. It's just we don't typically want to do it. Or the one time we walk out of jail and we desperately want to stay clean and sober, we walk out, we don't know what to do. And nobody has told us what to do. And so we may wander into a few meetings, or we may talk to a few people about it, but the relationship's gone, the house is gone, the job is gone, the vehicle that we thought was hidden until we could get out and catch up on our payments, it's all gone. And we get all pissed off, and we just get to that point where we throw up our hands. We're like, screw this. I'm going to go get high. And we do. And then guess what happens? We come back. That's the cycle that I was in for so many years. And I suspect that so many of you are in that cycle right now. And this is the time that here in a few days, I don't know what county you're in and what deal that you've made with the courts as far as completing this and then leaving the jail. But here's the one thing I know, those doors are going to swing open, whether it's in a couple of days or it's in a couple of weeks, however long it's going to be, those doors are going to swing open. You're going to walk out into the world and you have a new way to deal with everything. And if you've done what we've asked you to do during this, you've already looked into the jobs that are available and the housing, or at least if you have no way to access any of that, you have a definite game plan. You have the way to stay clean and sober. We've gone over the first 12 laws of the 15 laws of success that are going to help. It helps anybody be successful, but by working those steps, we automatically know how to do this stuff for these 12 laws that so many people find so difficult, like the developing a pleasing personality. Well, that just comes from trying to do the right thing and trying to be nice to people. The pleasing personality is automatic. Then there's different things about, different laws about like accurate thought, the way we learn how to separate information from fact, and all the different studies we've done on that. And we realize that that's nothing more than part of our fifth step, where we get information and we can quickly decipher it. We see what is real, what is not, what is important, and what is not, so we can move forward. And as we continue to practice that skill, and it is a skill, when you're at work and you suddenly can just look at any situation and intuitively know what the right decision is, they're going to be fascinated by you. And people are going to start asking you, how do you always know the right answer? I'm going to be like, what do you mean, man? I don't know that I've made more than 1 or 2 right answers in my entire life. But this is a skill that's going to happen. And when we take all the information that we have, and then we look at it through our new lens of open-mindedness, patience, tolerance, willingness, we put all these things together, and we look through it in that new lens, and guess what? 9 out of 10 times, the right decision is going to come up. If we truly don't know what the right decision is, we have people that we can call. And if there's a decision to be made on the spur of the moment, and we're looking at what information we have, and there's nobody that can help us at that moment, and a decision needs to be made right then, you're, again, 9 out of 10 times, you're going to make the right decision if you look at it through that lens. And that's going to fascinate people. That will get you elevated at work. That will, if you start your own company, that will elevate you there. Now, I want to talk about our own company for a few minutes, because I've mentioned it many times. There are some of us who have worked for ourselves since we were kids, when we were, whether it was a lemonade stand or pushing a mower around or detailing cars or whatever it is that we could do that we could make a buck when we were a kid, because we wanted more money. We saw somebody had something that we didn't have, and we wanted some money so that we could go get that. So we figured out how to start making money. And so some of us have this entrepreneurial spirit that's been with us our entire life. Others, it kind of awakens. And we start looking at how we have been able to overcome all these obstacles in our life, even though our life looked like a train wreck. You know, waking up with no dope, having to figure out when I ain't got no money, no car, no job, but still I figure out by the end of the day how to have a good time and just make things happen for me. We have figured out how to overcome obstacles. We have figured out how to do all these different skills that the common person may or may not have. But we don't often think about them as skills. And certainly, nobody out there who doesn't understand us is going to say, oh man, that's a skill. Nobody looks at the guy slinging dope and says, you know, he's got some skills, but as we've talked about and dissected, he is running a multi-million-dollar company with product that he has to get new product, he has to turn the product he has to acquire customers, he has to retain those customers, he has to deal with competition, he has to deal with the regulatory force that is trying to shut him down, he has to deal with his finances. There is so many skills in that. And the average person is go, yes, but he's slinging dope, he needs to go to prison for the rest of his life. And that's how society looks at us. But we need to understand now that, yes, we can't sell dope and we can't take a baseball bat to our competitors, and the regulatory in this case is trying to shut us down, is the police trying to put us in the prison. It doesn't matter what business you're in. There is some sort of regulatory body out there. There's something that is going to govern a certain aspect of your job. Whether you're driving for yourself, whether you are, I don't know, building something, it doesn't matter. There's always a regulatory force. Many times it's the IRS, sometimes it's the EPA, sometimes it's a combination of many different things. In the treatment industry, I have to deal with my city, I have to deal with my county, I have to deal with my state, and when I say I have to deal with them, I have to meet certain requirements, I have to behave in a certain way, and then I've got the Joint Commission, which is the accreditation folks that is not required, but a lot of the really good treatment centers are JACO accredited. That's what the initials we call it, JACO. And they're the people who accredit hospitals. Now, hospital has to be done, but in order for me to enjoy billing insurance companies on behalf of some of my clients, I had to be accredited. And even above that, that accreditation says, hey, we go above and beyond. We have an excellent standard that we adhere to, and it's tough, and there's a lot of regulation for somebody who works for himself. And in speaking of a nonprofit, then I have that whole thing to contend to. I have a board of directors that I have to answer to. It's just, there's always going to be somebody who is over you that we have to answer to. And that could be your customers. That could be where you buy the products that you're going to sell, or where you obtain your raw materials, or it depends on what business you have. But some of you have always wanted your own business. And with these laws of success and the last couple that we're going to go through tomorrow, very important, you cannot miss this, especially if you're an entrepreneurial person, because there is one of the laws in particular that well, all of them, you need all three of them, but it's some really important stuff. Just because we're sober, just because we're being nice, not everything is going to go our way. There's going to be doors closed on our face. There's going to be people who say horrible things about us that sometimes we have to remember we probably earned that when we're out there being stupid and doing a bunch of nonsense. But in any case, there's going to be things, people are going to be horrific sometimes. There's going to be things that are not fair. But there's nothing anywhere that states that fair is a right, that fair is going to exist in your life. You know what we have? We have the ability to make things better for ourselves and the people around us. But fair, remember, fair is probably most of us doing life for all the dope we've had that's run through our fingers and through our bodies. So let's leave fair out of it. Let's also think about how people are going to talk to us in a manner that we don't like, that we feel threatened by it, or we're disrespected. I just can't think about how many of us go back to jail or jeopardize our freedom of what we say next or what we do next when somebody is disrespectful to us. Sometimes they call us horrible names. There are people who use all kinds of racial terms, and they're really awful people, and they're trying to get a rise out of us. Why would somebody use a racial slang? To piss that other person off. Because we're in a day and time where nobody's going to go, oh, that's offensive? Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't know. That's... When somebody is overtly trying to get under our skin and make us angry, it's because they want to see that reaction. And in today's world, somebody's probably recording that reaction. Remember when we talked about how if somebody comes into our business and they're overtly offensive and we chase them out the door, and the person out there on the sidewalk with the camera or the phone is recording everything, they didn't see the awful things they said to me inside my business. The only thing they saw was me running out of the store, shaking my fist, screaming and yelling and cussing and threatening somebody, possibly doing a beat down on somebody. And then my business probably gets ruined because everybody's like, good God, look at this. You say the wrong thing in this man's store, he's going to take you outside and beat you up. Or I go back to jail, which I earned if that's what happened. We can let stuff go without being a doormat. When we did our fifth step and we understood why we react the way we do, why we get so mad about things, all of a sudden we can see things for what they are. And if somebody is just trying to get a rise out of me, now it's hard, because we still get pissed off. And sometimes we do it all wrong, which is why we live in 10, 11, and 12, because you're going to say the wrong thing, you're going to do something stupid, and hopefully it's a one-time event that doesn't land you back in jail. But we're going to say the wrong thing. We're human, we're fallible, we're never going to be perfect. And when I say one-time event, I don't mean that you just get mad one time. I mean that you react really poorly. Because I promise you, somebody's going to say something or do something, and you're going to react really poorly. And then you're going to have a chance to clean that up. And hopefully that when we do that, when we just lose our shit, hopefully that's a one-time deal, because that puts us in danger for relapse. When we get in that heightened sense of anger, or we're emotionally compromised in any level, of any way, that we are at a huge risk at that moment for relapse. Contrary to belief of some people, that we start thinking about, well, I'm starting to think that I'm going to go use on Tuesday. It's usually a split-second thing. Something happens, we lose our shit, before we know it, we're drunk or we're high. And we're sitting there going, how in the hell did this happen? And you know what usually happens? For me anyway, about the time I'm sitting there going, what have I done? How could this happen? That's when the police lights show up. And then they see me, and looks like nothing's changed. It's like the same thing they've always seen, exactly what they expect. I'm emotionally compromised, I got dope on me, and at that point, there's no sense of saying, hey, but I've been clean for a little while. That is business as usual. That is me doing the same thing and going back. All what? Because somebody said something really ugly to me? See, this is what we have to think about, and this is the hard thing to think about, is that if somebody's really ugly and says something really horrific to you, and they just, it's just that you think that person is such a bad person. And yeah, there's something truly evil about the person that knows that if they poke at us and poke at us and poke at us, that we're going to lose our shit and probably get high. And then they can sit there and go, you see, I told you. What we need to think of is that when that thing happens, we can react like we always have and get what we always have. And then you're going to be sitting there thinking, if we can get past the justification of it, remember that righteous justification? Well, I was right, I don't care, you say that, this is what happens, I don't care. Well, right, there's a lot of people in a penitentiary who are serving life who had that same thought. And, oh man, I ain't dead. Okay, I get it. I want to be free. I don't want to go back to jail. I want to be able to do the things that I want to do. I want to do the things with the people that I want to do it with. I want to have a life. I want to have a life where I'm not a doormat. Somebody says something stupid to me, and somebody else hears, and we think, oh my God, they're going to think less of me. When we did our fifth step, we understood that, about how we act a certain way because we have a certain reputation. We want everybody to look at us a certain way. And now somebody's challenging me. Maybe it's a guy who's called me a bitch, and I'm thinking that you can't call a man a bitch, and now I got to fight you. It doesn't matter who wins or loses. This is where I was for so long. But now, because I did the work and I can see things clearly, I suddenly understand that, wow, this could send me back to jail. And if I go back to jail, it's a numbers game, because it could be the last time I go back to jail. Not because I start doing the right thing, because they keep me for the rest of my life. Because I've proven again and again and again that I am not to be trusted in the community. So if somebody calls me something ugly and I go out and I beat them down and then that's it, and I have proven to everybody, including the judge, that I am not to be trusted in society, they're going to fix that. They're going to make sure that their kids and everybody else's kids is safe, because I am not to be trusted. And they're going to put me away for life. Maybe I'll make parole when I'm a really old man. And if I step out of line at that point, it'll be like, I guess you just need to finish up inside. It is 100% up to you if you want to go back to jail or not. I think we all say as we leave every time, I ain't never coming back here again. But inside we kind of know we are. But you now have all the knowledge to be successful. If you're going to start your own business, man, there's nothing cooler than being able to work for yourself. But it is hard, and you have to have follow through. You have to be willing to move forward no matter what, no matter how scary things are, no matter how just beat down you're feeling, because it's not as easy as you thought it was going to be. Consistency, moving forward, going back to work. You know, I work Monday through Friday because that's how I set it up. And the great thing about when you start the organization, you get to decide when you're going to work. Now, you need to work full time. You need to tend to your business. And you may just be working for yourself with just yourself, but you might get to that point one day to where you really need people working for you. And you start hiring other people. And, you know, we talked about this. You need an attorney and you need a CPA. A different kind of attorney than the one you're used to having. Not a criminal attorney. You need an attorney that can help you if you need to make contracts, if you need to, you know, you just need... If you're developing a contract for your customers to sign, let an attorney draft it for you. It's going to cost, but better safe than sorry. I always want to make sure that I'm protected. So I check with my attorney, he draws up my contracts, and I check with my CPA to make sure that what I'm doing is right and I'm not going to get in trouble, and the IRS ain't going to come and go, oh, you made a mistake there, buddy. You didn't file this, so you owe us all this money. I don't want that to happen. I don't want anybody to shut down my business and take it away. It's hard enough as it is. But you have to have the tenacity to step out there when maybe everybody else says you can't do it. And you can step out there. You have the skills to make it done. You have to have the follow through and the consistency that no matter what they know, yeah, check it out. That's what they do. They've been doing it that way all along. That's how that is. When people start looking at you like you always have the right answer and you're always punctual, you're where you're supposed to be, you're polite to people, you just see things that some people don't see. You know, I've been rewatching, I mentioned the Men Who Built America. It's on History, the History Vault. And so I've been rewatching it since I last talked about it. And it is fascinating what some of those men understood. Now, some of them were pretty brutal, and a lot of what they were doing back then is now illegal, and it's illegal because of the way they were doing it. This is how a lot of labor laws happen. When Carnegie Steel in Pittsburgh ran into a tough time and there was this big labor dispute, it got ugly. His main guy who was running it for him, his name was Fisk, he hired the Pinkertons, which at this point were paid mercenaries. They were like a private army. They used to, you know, guard a railroad and go find the people who robbed railroads, because you're out in this vast country and who's in charge. There was no jurisdictional issues. You know, it was just out in the middle of nowhere. So they hired the Pinkertons. And the Pinkertons came in, and there was this big ugly standoff. A bunch of people got killed, and there's now all these labor laws in place. A lot of the things that happened were illegal. There was monopolies. There was all kinds of things going on. But the interesting thing that I get out of each one of these episodes is how these men, even though they may have been very brutal, some of them, they all had this streak of genius in them. They would look at a situation and go, hey, this is something that doesn't exist that should exist. They would like to see a whole. Like, how do we convince everybody that this is what they need? Kerosene used to light all the houses. Once everybody saw that they could get kerosene from Rockefeller, he lit all the houses in the country. Everybody used his kerosene, and that's how, you know, they had the kerosene lamps, and that's how things were done. And he had a monopoly on that. He owned 98% of all the kerosene that was refined in the country was his, because he ran out and bought everybody up or closed them down, did whatever he had to do, because he was a brilliant man, but he was a brutal man. And he just, the one thing he hated more than anything was competition of any kind. And then one day, Thomas Edison invents a light bulb. And all of a sudden, there's this possibility of electricity, which can make Rockefeller's kerosene worthless, that nobody needs it anymore, that he loses every single customer he has to this man. Now, obviously, you know, moving forward, that there's a lot of products that came out of crude oil. Gasoline, the oil. So the oil business, the Rockefellers, they were fine, but at this moment, the one thing they got out of crude oil was refined kerosene, and that was how he made his fortune. That's how he took over the country as far as the oil business goes. And you had some big guys fighting over railroads, and the railroad had to move the oil, and so he pitted everybody against each other. He got the best deals he could, but Rockefeller needed the trains needed Rockefeller. Well, one day they got into this big argument, and they're like, we're not giving you a deal anymore on anything. So Rockefeller built the first pipeline, and he cut the trains out, and he bankrupted some of the ones who were trying to move against him. Man, the train guys, they were brutal. There's been a lot of shows on that. There's one show called Hell on Wheels that gives you a good look at the people who actually, the work camp that went around and built these rails. It was a brutal time in our history. Brutal for everybody. But Thomas Edison makes this energy, this invisible energy that goes to the light bulb and lights it up. It's like magic to people. And so it looks like he's going to take over everything as far as what Rockefeller was in charge of. And then Tesla, a guy who worked for Thomas Edison, Nikola Tesla, he steps out with a different kind of electricity, because Tesla says, hey, with an alternating current, AC, we can transmit power much further, and I believe it's much more effective, whereas Edison was using direct current, and it didn't travel as far. For direct current in New York, where Edison lit up half of Manhattan, each power station could only light up X amount of homes. Whereas the way Tesla was thinking, he could make a power station that could light up the whole East Coast from one spot, because it could travel so far. Men and women who have been highly successful in all different areas, talking about, they're kind of narrating, and they'll show it's like almost a docudrama. They'll show the people who are acting as, hey, this is Thomas Edison and this is this guy, and they do their thing. It's very interesting. But then they'll cut away, and it'll be like Mark Cuban or somebody talking about what's happening and how that applies today. If you get the opportunity to watch this miniseries on History Vault, what I want you to look at is how each one of these men were able to see a need, and a need that nobody knew they needed it because it didn't exist at the time. And so they went in and they figured out how to fill that need in a way that everybody could see it and go, oh my God, I need that. Before kerosene, nobody had lit up houses at night. When it got dark, it got dark. Then there was kerosene. Then there was electricity. And that took over. And it was something that nobody even knew what it was. And these men brought it to the market and figured out how to get it everywhere. Same with automobiles and airplanes, the internet, the laptop, mobile phone, the iPhone. My iPhone has more computing power than the first rocket that we sent to the moon, and you hold it in your hand. It's amazing what has taken place in just the last 100 years. And to understand it now, we've just become accustomed to it. People used to be amazed when the lights came on. They flipped the switch and it's like, oh my God, it's like magic. We pretty much understand that now. We understand that cars can drive long distances. We understand that planes can actually get in the air and fly around the world. We understand that we can go to the moon. We understand all kinds of things that just 200 years ago, if you had mentioned, they would have thought, man, there's something wrong with that guy. He's talking about flying to the stars and magic lights and horseless carriages that are just going to carry us. They saw a need, they met it. So if you're thinking about doing a business, you need to look at what is missing. Maybe you're not going to invent something brand new, but if you're in your town and there is 17 stores of what it is that you would like to do, well, then maybe there shouldn't be 18. But maybe there's something that's missing, that there is a need in your community that is not necessarily being filled, or there's not enough capacity for the need, meaning they could take another store. There's not just one McDonald's in my town, there's probably 8 of them. Why? Because one wasn't enough to feed everybody. There's 8 of them. They're scattered about in different spots. Some of them are right down the street from each other. Sometimes you see them across the street from each other. But the point is that if there wasn't the people or the demand, then there wouldn't be 8 McDonald's. There's 8 McDonald's in my town because there was a demand for it. If it's a town big enough to only support 1 McDonald's, and somebody goes in there and opens 3 more, all 4 of them are going to probably go broke because there's not enough demand. Maybe you're a very gifted tattoo artist. Maybe you picked up your skill while you've been in jail or perfected it. Maybe you've never taken the time to go and work under somebody else as an apprentice to earn your stripes, basically. And then you get your license from the state that you're in that allows you to do it, so that you're not just a renegade tattoo guy in the house somewhere that's not licensed. And there are plenty of people that do that. But maybe in your town there just isn't a good alternative for people who want to get a tattoo because they become very mainstream. And if we look at tattoo parlors, some of them, we may feel comfortable in them, but the typical person may not feel comfortable in it because it's scary to them. The people that are there, the music that's playing, the decorations, there's like heavy metal and skulls, and it freaks out a lot of people. So maybe what the town needs is a clean tattoo shop, something that's friendlier, because now so many, as we said, it's mainstream. A lot of people are getting tattoos, and so maybe we have an alternative that just feels safer. Kind of like when they started opening up nice, family-centered travel stops as opposed to the typical truck stop, because that could have been intimidating for a lot of people. So now we have this family. Like we talked about Buc-ee's here in Texas, and I understand they're in several states now. We have 96 pumps, and I don't know how many square feet that building is, but it is huge. It is huge. You can buy furniture, clothing, food, all kinds of food, prepared food, not prepared food, meats that are ready to be smoked. They've got hundreds of types of candy and beef jerky, and they got 100 stalls in the bathroom, which sounds ridiculous, but it's amazing. You never have to wait. It's always clean. There's always a stall open. It's nice when you're used to going to a crappy little gas station where the bathroom looks like where people shoot dope, because it is, and it's just disgusting and filthy, and you're like, oh, I don't want to touch anything, and you're like, don't touch the lid. You take your foot and you lift up this guy. Maybe that's just me. I go into one of them nasty bathrooms. I don't want to touch anything. I want to hit the flusher with my boot. I don't want to touch anything, not unless I absolutely have to. You walk into a place, there was a need for something like that, for families to stop by where the bathroom was plentiful, because everybody who's pulling in off the road, they need to go to the bathroom first. And if there's a line outside, you're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. It's clean, it's plenty of space, and then you can pick up food and snacks and whatever, get your fuel. It was a need, and it's been filled by many different people. But that's the point. You don't have to be an inventor to be an entrepreneur. You just have to look at what's necessary and figure out how you can make that happen. Like if it's necessary for another business doing whatever it is you want to do in your community, then that is an opportunity. It is also an opportunity to get out there and let people know, hey, this is what I'm doing and this is why you need it. Depending on what industry you're in, there's a bunch of different ways to do that. But it all is going to bank on these 12 steps and these 15 laws of success. You being able to reintegrate into the community is going to be that you have paid attention to everything we've had to offer you, from how we find our housing and our jobs, how we're going to deal with everything that is out there. Because there's a lot of people outside who don't believe you can make it. There is going to be some people who are rooting for you to fail. And I don't know why it has to be that way. It just is. Now, we don't want to come out and go, screw you guys, I'm going to make it. We just want to come out and be consistent and be nice. And then we can carry on with our lives. And we can just do it. And I promise you, your critics will fade. There's always going to be somebody who doesn't like you, but we don't have to let them occupy space in our life or in our mind. When somebody says ugly things to us, we just can remember that it's like, man, how miserable would it be to be that guy? Thank God that's not me. Thank God, man. That dude is spiritually sick. He's got some loose noodles up in that head of his. This has been one of the greatest joys of my career, being able to put this video series together. That you are getting the benefit of the customer support that we've built in for each county. So if your facilitators have questions, that they can find out the answers. They can also make the suggestions. And we're going to get together with everybody on an annual basis, all the facilitators, to do an update training for a couple of days so that we can talk about new content. Because I will tell you one thing, just like everything else I do, I'm never satisfied that I get to this certain spot and go, hey, it's done. I'm going to kick back now and just chill. For the rest of my life, I'm going to be working on how can we make this more effective, how can we get it in front of more people, and how can we add the content that is relevant to what the people need, because that could change over time. So it's not like, okay, we got this one set of DVDs, we'll stick them in the mail, and best of luck to y'all. It's going to be a living and breathing, an ever-growing program. And I'm honored that you are able to be a part of it. We have one more lesson together. And I'm just so incredibly excited about every possibility that you have in front of you. I've said a number of times that I want to hear how it's going. That's not some bullshit. I want to hear how it's going. As this program progresses and we're able to add more stories like the stories that you've been able to watch, I'd like to add your story. You can get your phone and you can record your story and you can shoot it in wide format like we're doing here. And I want to hear from you. I want to get those stories. I want to be able to take them and possibly put them right into this curriculum so that people across this country, that you become part of the voice that they hear, that they can see it over and over with all these different people. This weekend I was with a friend of mine, the Captain Davis from the Sheriff's Department, and I was over at his house, and we serve on drug court together. We work together to make this program. He's actually on the board of my nonprofit organization, but there's a girl that we put in drug court, and I saw her mugshot one day, and I was just devastated when I realized she was 26 years old in that picture. And I went back and I looked to see if there was earlier mugshots. Because the kind of charges she had like 3 big felony drug charges. And I'm like, so this probably ain't her first rodeo, especially looking at her mugshot. She certainly has been caught before, and she had been. And I saw her first mugshot from when she was 22. And here is this young, beautiful, blonde woman who just looks like anybody's daughter. She just looks like she looks like a young, blonde 22-year-old should look. And then 4 years later, here's this woman who looks like she's about to die. And I like, oh my God. I couldn't believe she was still alive and that she deteriorated that fast. And it was heroin she was doing. So I ran down there to see her at the jail. I missed her, but I knew she was going to be back. So I went to go visit her when she came back, and I was able to talk to her and ask her if she wanted help. She took our help. I think most of you were able to see her story that we've added into this, Amanda. And so she came, long story short, she came into drug court. And she took advantage of everything we had to offer her. She left when she graduated from drug court and carried on with her life and kept in contact with me. This weekend when I was with Jeff Davis, she sent us a text message thanking us again for giving her the opportunity, but she made the dean's list at college. Something she never ever thought she would do with her life. Something her father had hoped that she would do, but gave up a long time ago and was just trying to keep his daughter alive and out of the penitentiary if at all possible. Knowing at that point, from her father's point of view, is that she would have been safer in the penitentiary than on the streets. And as a parent, that's a hard thing for us to understand. Sometimes they're safer, almost always they're safer in jail than on the street. Even though it sucks being in jail, as we all know, sometimes our parents, our family, they're at peace because they know for the moment we're safe. Yeah, so no, at some point we're going to get out. So for this girl to send us a text message showing us that she made the dean's list, she took a picture of the letter that they sent her. Congratulations, your academic achievements have earned you a spot on the dean's list. This is a girl who figured she would be dead at any time. Hell, I figured she was going to be dead at any time. She has multiple felonies. She was looked on very poorly. She had destroyed what reputation she may have had as far as being this sweet little innocent girl, and she was a problem. And you knew it the second you laid eyes on her. You knew that she was a problem. And now she's got the whole world at the tips of her fingers. She's going to school to hopefully become a lawyer. She also wants a degree in psychology. Now, there's some uphill battles with that. She's going to have to get an expunction, or she's going to have to get a waiver, but she's already looked into it enough to know that she's going to move forward. She desperately wants to help women who are in her same position. So she understands even if she gets a degree in law and for one reason or another she's never allowed to take a bar exam and she can't be an attorney, she's going to have all that knowledge. And if she has a degree in psychology and she has a degree in law, she's going to be a force to be reckoned with. Something tells me that a little time and patience and effort, she's going to be able to be granted the opportunity to either be a counselor or an attorney, if not both, because of her past. Not in spite of her past, because of her past and because of why she wants to do what it is that she wants to do. That teamed up with some good old-fashioned sobriety and a strong program and a good work ethic, and then people from the community who will write letters on her behalf. Me. You see, I can't write a letter for just anybody. I can write a letter for somebody who I personally know and have personally seen them come through this transformation. Captain Davis, our judge, the probation officer that's part of drug court, the prosecutor, our whole drug court team, we all got together and wrote a letter so that she could get accepted into college. And we'll all get back together and we'll write letters so that she can move forward with the career that she wants, because we see a redeemed person. We see somebody who came out of jail and reintegrated into the community, remade. You see, reentry is a funny thing. There are some reentry programs that are focused only on how you can put together your resume, and when things get all right, that you can get to work and maybe think about recovery. Well, we address all of that while we're still in jail, and then reentry is simply you're going to go back into the community and you're going to do things different. There are a lot of resources out there for you, and there's some great reentry programs. But for some reason, there's either a reentry program or a recovery program, and they're not necessarily combined when they should be. Because if 80% of the folks incarcerated have an addiction, then what are we doing having reentry programs that don't address addiction, other than saying, well, you just need to go to some meetings and you need to do some step work. We need to, this stuff is too important to just, to not grab a hold of it and make sure it's done the right way. I'm not saying anything bad about any other recovery program or any reentry program. I'm just saying that I noticed a void in our county jail system to have a program like this that combines recovery and it combines reentry. Because my research, at least in this area, I don't see them being combined. There are some brilliant reentry programs, but reentry it should be a broad term. It should include your housing, it should include your career focus, and it should include your recovery. It has to include all of this. This is why we've spent so much time looking at our budgets, talking about how we're going to deal with landlords, talking about how we're going to deal with the public in general, how we are going to deal with law enforcement. All of that comes together to make us who we are. How do I know about walking out of jail and putting everything back together? Because I walked out of jail 42 times. I was always able to find a job. I was always able to put certain things together. But because of my addiction, everything always fell apart. I cannot wait for tomorrow's lesson. It is like putting the final bow on this 90-day journey that we've done together. I'm absolutely serious about wanting you to submit the stories that you have. The story of how you maybe went through this program, what your thoughts were about it. Maybe you looked at it and you thought, I ain't gonna listen to this guy. Maybe you were desperate and you ate every word that came out. I want to know how things went when you got out. I want you to document it. See, getting an email where you're telling me how cool everything is, that's awesome. But if you're willing to document it, then we can share that with the world. And the reason we want to do that is because somebody's going to be watching this, and it's going to be your testimony that they go, damn, and it's going to click. I really, really want to thank you for being a part of this. See you tomorrow.